Welcome to my two-player tutorial for normal mode for Knights of the Round for the Super Nintendo. Yeah, this is my first two-player tutorial, so it's going to be a little something different. I know most players are probably going to want to go through the game solo, so it's probably not going to be too applicable to people who are, playing, solo, because a lot of these strategies really rely on, pulling bullshit with two players together, being able to coordinate certain techniques. I'm going to show how to pull some bullshit. We found some really good strategies. I was playing with the legendary fucking Bob Rupples, my good friend, and we were messing around with some two-player shit. And a long time ago, we really destroyed Captain Commando on the Super Nintendo, but that was before I had recording capability, so we may redo that one, and I may do a similar tutorial for that. And we may do some future games like that. I think it's kind of interesting to show two-player strategies as opposed to just going through the game solo. Now, I thought this game was pretty solid for a solo game, and I'm going to do a separate review on it. But I really fucking enjoyed the game when I played it on two players recently. I thought it was a lot more enjoyable. Other than that, playing it on solo, I think it's pretty serviceable. It's one of the better beat-em-ups on the Super Nintendo, I would say. There's not a lot of great ones, but definitely not one of the best. I would, much rather play Final Fight 2 or 3, and definitely some other games. It is a lot better than Captain Commando for the Super Nintendo, which is a pretty bad port of the arcade game. But with all that out of the way, I'm playing as the axe-wielding character, Percieval, and my friend is the other character. So for this first boss, like many of the bosses, you want to try to leave a gap between you and the boss, and, hit the boss over to the other player so that you can kind of sandwich the boss and do massive amounts of damage. Now, with this first boss, he's so easy that you really could just deal with him by yourself and have the other player just take on the minions. That's another strategy as well. Depending how aggressive you want to be with it, you could easily just have the other player take on the minions. Now, the strategies we used are based on these two players that we used, because we didn't try it with Arthur, which is the third playable character. So I liked Percieval because he has a running attack. He's the only one that has a run and a running attack, which I like. But his running attack, it's not great, but it's decent. His jump attack is completely useless as he has no anti-air capabilities. When you do his jump attack, he waits until his feet hits the ground and then does an attack. It really makes no sense. Some of the playability of this game, is a little bit off. You would expect all characters to be able to run and dash and do running attacks, but only the axe-wielding Percieval can do running attacks, or just run in general. So, there's definitely some limitations with the gameplay. It's a stiffer type of gameplay. But it's a pretty solid game. Capcom usually makes use out of limited gameplay mechanics in a lot of their beat-em-ups. And this is one of those games. So, the main strategy is going to be, like I said, based around the characters you see us using, though I think you could probably swap out characters and get similar results on a lot of these parts. Just keep in mind, I did not test these strategies with any other characters. We just played as these two characters throughout the entire time playing. Now, I believe it took me something like 9 hours and 40 minutes to finally beat the game on normal, but what I was doing was I was starting off playing on easy solo by myself, and then I was playing on normal solo a little bit, and I got far on those attempts, but then I switched over to two players and beat it on normal. So keep in mind that I don't really have a legit completion time because I switch between solo, two players, and different difficulties, so I don't really have a good completion time that's really consistent, something that I can really, say that that's how long it took. But that's the best that I have, because I like to fuck around. I like to, I'm restless. I like to jump around between difficulties. I like to jump around single player, do two player, fuck around, do different things like that. I think it's fun. I don't like to just always do the same thing. I wasn't really expecting to play it on two players, but then I was hanging out with my friend, let's play this shit. See what we can do. I thought it would be cool. It was getting a little tedious on solo. It's not as much fun to me to play it on solo. I feel like the game's a little limited for solo play, but it's decent enough. So yeah, these strategies are going to be based around these two characters that we used. Now his character actually the blue character has a pretty good jumping attack. So when it comes to dealing with birds, he's going to be the one that deals with them. So you'll see I use him I always tell him to go out and kill the birds for me, so I can deal with the other enemies. So that's just part of coordinating with two players. If you have a player that has a jumping attack, get him to take care of the birds and get them out of the way. Now, in that case, the bird got hit on the ground, I believe. You can hit them on the ground, which I do accidentally sometimes. It's usually not intentional because they're kind of hard to hit when they're on the ground. But, have the other player with the jumping attacks take out the bird. It's just a good way to do it. The main thing with this tutorial I think that's going to be really cool is the boss fights. We really, really destroyed the bosses, and it was pretty cool. I thought that would be cool to cover, so I thought this would be perfect for a tutorial. But it's very specific to two players, so it's a very different type of tutorial. So for this second boss, first you want one of the players to knock him off the horse. You don't want the boss to be on the horse. Then have Lancelot take the horse because he has the longest reach on the horse. So he's a great player to use the horse, better than the character I'm using, Percival. So, have him get on the horse, and you can pretty much just mash the attack button and keep a little range and kind of just push the boss back very easily. You can have the other player take care of the minions, and when the other player gets a chance, help out with getting some of the damage in. And that's pretty much about it. That's the general strategy we use. Very simple. The first two bosses are extremely easy. Now, one thing I didn't mention about the first boss, if you're fighting him, you don't really need help from the other player, as I said, because he's so easy. And you're going to fight them as normal enemies early on in the game. They're called tall men. To deal with them, all you really need to do is just keep a little bit of distance between you and the tall man and just mash the attack button. They'll just keep walking into your attacks and they'll get destroyed. Now, occasionally they have a throwing attack that can sometimes break through, so they can be a little dangerous, but once you've dealt with enough of them, you'll rarely get hit by them. These birdmen, as they're called for some reason, they don't fly or anything, so it's a kind of a strange name. But these guys are one of the more annoying enemies of the game. They have, they're pretty aggressive. But most of the enemies, though they look different, fighting them is pretty much the same. Some enemies have a little bit more reach, but the methods you're going to use are going to be pretty similar. Usually you want to keep a little distance between the enemies when striking and maybe move up or down a little bit so that they come up to you on the plane that you're on. That's usually how these beat-em-ups work, the best way to play a lot of times. And that's just a common technique with beat-em-ups. If you're familiar with these games, you'll know that. Now, the actual levels themselves was not perfected for this tutorial. This is my normal, regular level play of me and my friend just playing through the game on our successful attempts. So we may have died a few times on the levels we did. So that's going to be shown. But the boss fights are actually spliced in from practice sessions and from my actual legit run of the game. So my legit run, it had a very good first boss where we really destroyed the first boss, and that's shown here. It also had two phantom fights that were clean enough with no deaths, so I left those in. And I'm going to show two killings of the final boss because one is actually faster and more aggressive, and the other one is a no-death run of the final boss. So I'm going to show both of those in this tutorial. But it's a mix. This is a tutorial, so it's just, it has footage spliced in. I try to show the best moments, and for this I wanted to focus on the best ways that we found in practice. These were our best runs of the bosses when we practiced with saved states. We started the boss fights from the beginning each time, and we just kept playing them, sometimes for a very long time until we got really good runs. And we would do that a few times to make sure we had it down. So all in all, I probably spent, I would say, probably like 13 or 14 hours on the game to make this tutorial. But to simply beat the game, maybe 9 hours and 40-something minutes, something like that. But I spent some extra time to really, it took us a while to get that final boss down for a no-death run. I got really lucky when I was playing my first time through. We got really lucky and we did really well on the boss, and I only died once. So I would have almost kept that, but I wanted to make a boss domination video, which is where I show all the bosses with no deaths. In the instance of this game, I was going to do no death on all the bosses, and the final boss was the only one I didn't have footage of a no death run on that. So we spent probably over 2 hours just on that fight with isolated states to get a really good run, and that's going to be shown here. So yeah, Lancelot, the blue guy, has a little bit more reach with his sword. I believe he's a little bit weaker, but he does have the extra reach, especially on the horse. So whenever there's a horse, let him have the horse. And if you just keep mashing the button with him, you can keep the enemies at bay and really destroy hordes of them by just staying a little bit behind, in front of them, but leave a little bit of a gap so that they walk into your sword strikes. It's very simple. And, the other player can help out a little bit. So keep in mind, in this game, there's 2 ways to get your health refilled. You do not get your health refilled between stages unless you get enough points. Because when you beat a stage, you get a bonus tally of points. If those points go over the limit you need, see where it says next 80,000 on both of our bars up at the top there? If you happen to hit the score of 80,000, say, at the end of a level, you'll level up. And when you reach another level, you become more powerful, I believe, but most importantly, in a lot of ways, you get your health completely refilled. So, 2 things you want to keep an eye for if you want to play effectively is you want to look to see when you're about to level up so that you won't take the health and you'll let your friend get the health instead so he can keep his life full. Because it doesn't benefit you to hoard all the health and items, because then you may survive, but then you don't have that help anymore, and your friend's going to drain your lives pool. Since you share all your lives and continues are shared on 2 players. So you don't want your friend to be wasting lives. So I believe maybe you have 8 or 9 continues like in the regular game and maybe 2 lives for each continue. But that can go really fast if someone's draining lives. It'll fuck up the whole run. So both need to play very well and coordinate very well. And see, I'm pretty bad with coordinating when it comes to multiplayer. I'm more of a solo. I like to run off and shit. So I'm not the best coordinator. So it took me some time, but I mean, it wasn't the bosses were the trickiest part. And I wasn't always the best. Sometimes because I'm not good at following what other people are doing, my friend would kind of follow my path and just work within that because I'm not the best at changing my strategies on the fly to kind of match what someone else is doing, you know what I mean? So keep that in mind, play to the strengths of your partner, whoever you're playing with, If they're not good at coordinating, then maybe try to follow them and work with that. The magicians are very easy to take out. I'm not going to be giving a ton of level strategies just because the enemies are pretty easy to deal with. There's only a few parts that are kind of tricky not to get damaged or killed on because of the combinations of enemies. But the magicians are very easy. Just go up to them, mash the shit out of them. Just watch out because they can teleport right on your position and damage you. So just be careful of that. Most of the enemies, it's about keeping a little bit of distance and just smashing the button or moving down or up slightly so they have to come up to you or down to you on a diagonal path into your strikes. That confuses enemies in most beat-em-ups when they have to move diagonally to get to you. So that's always a great strategy for many beat-em-ups, and it's something you should be doing without even thinking about it. If you've played beat-em-ups, you should just be doing it naturally. And if you're new to beat-em-ups, then it's something you will learn. Just try it out, and you should adapt to that pretty quick. You see, as the enemies come up into your strikes, they have trouble getting out that first strike. Whenever you try to face enemies head-on in a lot of beat-em-ups, it's about trading hits. They probably will get the first hit a lot of times if you're facing them head-on. So you want them to either walk up or walk down to you a little bit on a diagonal slope to get to you. It just makes their life more difficult. The phantom enemies are actually regular enemies, but they're also bosses later on, and they're very easy. They just flip around a lot, and they take longer to kill because, you can't get as many hits in before they flip out of your path. Now, the tigers in this area, I believe it's just a rush of tigers, and you can kind of just dodge them and let them leave the screen. Now, in some areas, you do have to fight them and kill them. Here, I believe it's just a barrage of tigers, and you just can dodge them. Actually, no, this was not the part where tons of tigers run in. Now, for this boss, you're going to see the sandwiching in action, pretty hardcore here. So keep a little bit of a gap between you and the boss, and kind of smack the boss into the other player, as you see me doing here. And we're kind of just trading the boss off to each other, passing him around like a fucking bag of chips until he's worn out, you know what I mean? And dead. So that's the basic idea here. Now, as far as the minions go, occasionally, you want to have the other player take out one of the minions because they can cause a big problem. Ideally, you want to take out the minions as you're striking the boss, getting a little 2-for-1 action going on, and that can make things a lot easier as well. But you can't always line it up like that, so just do what you can. Have the other player take him out. Now, I wasn't dodging this guy great, but I learned it better on the last boss, because if you learn this guy, you almost learn the final boss. It's a very similar fight, but the final boss is like a version of this guy with more moves, so you will have to learn a little bit more, but you're learning a lot by mastering this guy. So practice this guy with save and load states, and practice each boss until you really have it down with your partner and you got it down well. But when that boss jumps, as soon as he lands, there's going to be fire that surrounds him and damages you. So as he's about to land, you want to be airborne. So jump up in the air as he's about to land. and you'll dodge it every time very easily. Once you get the rhythm down, you shouldn't get hit by that at all. Other than that, pass the guy around to your partner by, mashing a button and knocking him around, as you saw me doing. And it's really not too hard, but just practice that. It does take a rhythm, and it does take practice to dodge the boss's attacks consistently and be able to do that. Make sure that you and the person that you're playing with are on the same page as far as lining up to catch the boss. Because, once you combo the boss, you want your partner to have a little gap on the other side so he can catch the boss, smack him around for a combo. Then after the combo finishes, the boss gets knocked back to your side again, and then it's your turn to knock him back. You want to keep a little bit of a gap so you can pass him around, and he doesn't get knocked too far to where he goes over where you're standing, and then of course it messes up the whole sandwich. You want to keep a sandwich position. So as I was saying before, it's important if your partner is a level lower than you, or vice versa, you want to let them get the treasure because they're going to get more points and then they can catch up in level. You don't want to be, 2 or 3 levels ahead of your partner like I am here. That's a little bit, sloppy. I mean, I was kind of greedy, but it's better to try to keep them around the same level just to balance it out. So be mindful of that. It's not super important. I mean, if there's a few levels difference, I don't think it's going to matter that much. But it is good to have a partner that has like a similar power level. I think Percieval is the strongest character as it is, so he really doesn't need to be leveled above, this other character. But we weren't super concerned with that. It wasn't like the game was that hard. So this boss is very, very easy. Even if you're playing solo, you just smack this guy around and dodge the axes. When he throws them, just move out of the way of those cleavers that he throws. And aside from that, just be ready to strike him when he lands and combo him when he lands. It just takes a little while because he jumps around a lot. It's the same as the regular enemies that you fought. There's just more of them. And, you want to try to line up 2 or 3 of them in the same row and just kind of group them together if you can. It's just easier. Does more damage. I believe there's only one of them that you actually have to damage. The other ones are just clones. And they're just there to kind of waste your time. Now, as far as the birds goes, I had my partner do his jumping attacks to take out those birds immediately. Because those birds are the only thing that can be hard in this fight and cause a lot of problems. They will damage you massively if they keep swooping in on you. And as my character, Percieval, has no jumping attacks. So, because of that, because my character has no jumping attack, I need the other character, Lancelot, to do all the jumping attacks. So now here, I guess in this run, I left in the death on the Phantom. I guess I was unaware that we even died on this. I guess we both died at the same time. But in the boss domination video, I think I have a clean version of that fight, if I remember right. I may have to go back and fix that. It's such an easy fight that I didn't really think much about it. But there was really no need to die there. But, with the birds, just make sure you have the other player jump and take out the birds. Because, like I said, if you're playing as Percieval, which I recommend one person use him, you're not going to be able to do any jumping attacks. So you're only going to be able to attack the birds when they're on the ground, which is pretty much the worst way to deal with them. So, have the other player take out birds immediately. Now, in some parts, birds will just pass by if you just wait a little while. So you don't always have to take them out. But I would recommend, the other player usually be on top of that when birds appear. Because they can do a lot of damage to both players. So, you can try to hit them on the ground, but they're tricky to hit. It's much easier if you have somebody with an air attack. Now, Arthur may also have aerial attacks. I didn't use them, so I'm not sure what he has. I know that he can't run. I know Percieval's the only one who can run, which is pretty shitty. I mean, it should just be a standard thing in a beat 'em up to be able to run. Even Golden Axe had that, and Golden Axe is pretty old. Now, of course, the oldest beat 'em ups didn't have that. They probably didn't really think about that, but this game was really not that old at the time. There was a lot of beat 'em ups before this. So the sandwiching technique also works very well on regular enemies. So, whenever possible, try to keep the enemies in the middle, and you can take them out a lot faster with sandwich techniques. But as I was saying earlier about the health, if you don't need the health, don't get it. If you're about to level up soon, you may want to hold out a little bit longer and get the points and just get your full health by getting a level up, as that fills your bar completely. So these are just things to look at. It'll say next when you're about to get your next level. Compare that to the score at the top above your health bar, and that'll let you know when you're going to level up. So if you're about to level up, let the other player, get the health if they need it. It's just little things like that we would coordinate, and it just helps in the end. Especially if you're cutting it real close. But I think it shouldn't be too bad if you take, spend a few hours just practicing with your partner all the boss fights. Make sure you got the boss fights down. If you're having a lot of trouble with specific enemy combinations, maybe practice those sections too, of course. But neither one of us found that the enemies was the difficult part of the game at all. I mean, we pretty much blazed it most of the time. We'd lose a life here and there on the enemies. But the real challenge of this game for us was the bosses. And, it wasn't that they were that difficult, aside from the final boss, but we really wanted to get it down. And we ended up with some pretty clean fights that I think will be entertaining for the tutorial. And it's the reason I wanted to make a tutorial, because we had such good practice sessions on the bosses. I thought it would be cool to put all the best boss runs into a video. Just splice it into a video and add commentary. So now this is the first appearance of the tall man as a regular enemy. And they pretty much become somewhat of regular enemies. The harder regular enemies, I guess you could say. I find them easier, though, than a lot of the, like the fat guys with the spears, and some of the other enemies annoy me more. But yeah, see, here we have birds, and this is kind of a dangerous combination. So it would have been better to have the other player jump and take out the birds, but I guess we're a little preoccupied here. Either player can deal fine with the tall men just by kind of mashing and keeping distance. Just don't get too close. Sometimes they'll break through and throw you, which does a lot of damage. They're pretty easy overall, though. So yeah, birdmen can be a pain in the ass, especially when there's like 3 or 4 of them. Or usually I think they come in 2s or 3s, but they can be dangerous. You want to try to, if you can, try to sandwich them. It's better if you can get in between them and keep them in the middle. We didn't do that here, but it's better if you can do that. It makes it a lot easier. It's not always practical, though, because sometimes you just don't have the spacing to really sandwich enemies, and sometimes it's just better to take them on, to have 2 different people taking on enemies, so you can spread out your damage, over a wider area. That way your partner can take out 1 or 2 enemies, you can take out another 1 or 2 enemies. Sometimes that just works better. It just depends on what's going on, so try to read what's going on and adapt to it. But I don't think most players that are at least familiar with beat-em-ups are going to have too much trouble with the regular enemy arrangements. I'm not sure how well these methods translate to the hard difficulty setting, as we only played on normal. So I played on easy originally, and I'm sure this stuff would destroy easy. But I cannot say for hard. Now this boss is one of the harder ones, but it's a similar technique to what we were doing. So, except it's a little different here. What we do is we do 2 strikes, then a special move. 2 strikes, then a special move. 2 strikes, then a special move. We both are doing that. And we stick to that rhythm. 2 strikes, then a special move. And as long as we have a little distance between them, and we keep an eye on the minions, so the minions don't interrupt what we're doing, because that'll fuck it up as well. You also want to wait for the fat guy, the boss, to jump to the middle of the arena. You want to wait till he pretty much belly flops to the middle of the arena. Try to get him to jump and belly flop to the middle of the arena. Then you both close in on him, one on the left, one on the right. Keep a little bit of a gap and start doing what I said, strike twice and then do a special. Strike twice, then do a special. And just keep alternating like that with twice special. And you will pass him around and do massive damage. Now, it does drain your health as well, but it's worth it because you could easily lose a lot of lives on that guy. And if you level up, of course, you'll get your health back, which can very well happen by points when your score tallies up at the end of the stage. Or, you can just try to hold out and get some health in the beginning of the stage. Like I said, when you beat a stage, you don't get all your health back, like most beat-em-ups. So, you want to try to coordinate when you're going to level up. Now, it is very hard to coordinate who's going to pick up that meat that comes out of the boss when he dies, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. You don't really have to be that anal about it. But the boss does drop some meat, so if you can stand next to where the meat's going to come out, the guy who needs it can get it, but you're both going to be low on health anyway, because you're both going to be abusing your special moves by doing 2 strikes and a special, spamming the shit out of that. I found that worked very well, though. Like I said, that 2 strikes and a special method is what I recommend, and it worked great for us. On that, we can beat it without losing a life. Now, if your health is already low, of course, you may lose a life because you're not going to have enough health to use your specials. So, it's not going to be a flawless method, but it does beat trying to fight him normally, which can be a pain in the ass. Now here we got some Fats with spears. They can be annoying because they have a long reach, so just be aware of them. Try to close in on them fast and just take them down. But yeah, you can see very specific techniques on the bosses, and it worked well for us. And, by watching that fight against that previous boss, it wouldn't be really clear that we were doing 2 strikes and then a special and alternating like that. Somebody who was really observant could notice it if they really wanted to really, dig into it. But I think it's worthy of an explanation. We spent a good amount of time refining these strategies, so, it was cool to put it together. It was a satisfying game in the end to get a nice run. The shield guys aren't really difficult, and the good thing about them is that you can choose when to aggro them a lot of times. And, of course, what I mean by that is choose when to lure them out, because they will just stand there and not even attack you for a while. And in this game, you want to try to inch the screen little by little. You don't want to have either one of your characters run, because it'll kind of push the screen into your partner and make it harder for him to survive. The other issue is running out too aggressively, in the middle of the screen will spawn more enemies at once. It seems like you can cut down on enemy spawns and also cut down on the aggression of enemies, because some enemies won't even engage you unless you get within a certain range. So for some enemies, if you see them just standing still and not even moving towards you, try to lure out just one enemy and deal with that enemy first. You can do that a lot in this game. Not a huge amount, but enough to where, it is worth doing that. Because any damage you take is going to add up. So, you really want to try to lure guys out when possible. Now, of course, that wouldn't be ideal for a speed run, but this is just a tutorial to beat the game. These guys just drop. Usually, they'll drop like some treasure. Now, with 2 birdmen, or 2 tall men, what I like to do, I use my special here to move both of the guys together on the other side of me. It doesn't matter if it's the left or right side. And then once I have them both on one side of me, me and my partner here just mash the button until we, until they both die. But I like having them both on one side. So I recommend using your special move there. I rarely use special moves on regular enemy encounters, but for that for that one part, I do recommend using that to move them, because it'll knock them back at the same time. So you want to knock them both back on the other side of you, and then you can deal with both of them very easily. But as you can see, a lot of the techniques for the regular enemies encounters, they don't get too complex. It's not like anything insane. It's pretty basic. The bosses are really where things can get tricky. And as you can see, a lot of these strategies really, really utilize and rely on the 2-player mechanic to really pull some cooperative bullshit that you couldn't otherwise do on single player. So that's why I made a little disclaimer. Now, see, that orb is kind of useless, but this second green orb right here is good because you can clear out all the birdmen. Those orbs will always clear out all enemies on screen. So keep that in mind. And try to use them only when you need them. Don't just pick them up for the points if there's no enemies on screen. Now, that first one, you kind of have to do that because there's no enemies around unless you made those really easy enemies in the beginning of the stage follow you to the orb. You could do that, but they're really easy. You really don't need to do that for that first orb, that red one. But yeah, what the cool thing, like I said, about this version of the video and this tutorial is that it really relies on those 2-player coordination. That's why I made a little disclaimer in the beginning that, if you're going to play the game solo, this is more of a video for entertainment. You may learn a little bit, but you're mostly going to get a benefit out of this if you really want to do a 2-player run with somebody. And yeah, it's going to be unlikely. It's not the easiest thing to set up 2 players. And not a ton of people are probably playing this game, but it's just something different. I've done a lot of tutorials. All my tutorials have been on solo runs of games. So I just wanted to do something a little different. And this was the way I beat the game. I didn't have enough interest in the game to go back and try to complete it solo. I did get deep into the last boss fight on solo, but I didn't complete it. But it wouldn't have been the kind of dominance that's happening here with 2 players where we really dominated the bosses, really clean. I would have had to practice the bosses a lot more to get them down really well. And you just can't beat the bosses nearly as quickly as you can on 2 players when you coordinate like that. So I think it's something different. I think it's going to be a good video. The fight should be entertaining. I do show them all in my boss domination video, which just shows all the bosses from this tutorial. But I wanted to break it down. There's a few other tutorials that I'm going to try to bang out soon. I did a few more playthroughs recently. Final Fight for the Amiga. Piece of shit game, but I did beat that. And that's kind of a comedy tutorial in some ways because the game is so fucking bad. But there's definitely some things to learn from that I can, pass on that would make it more approachable. Now, this boss is one of the harder ones because you can't sandwich the shit out of him. You know what I mean? You can, though. See, so here we are. We were waiting for him to get up to that part of the screen, at least the middle of the screen. And then we sandwich him just by mashing the button again. Now, whenever he goes up like that, he's going to shoot down some orbs. You can time your block at just the right moment to reduce some damage, or you can usually just get in the bottom left or bottom right corner, depending where he's at, and they won't even hit you at all. So either way. Now, for this guy, aside from when he does those orbs, the idea is to just get him in the middle and try to sandwich him. You don't want him to get too much on the edge of the screen, when he's fucking around on the edge, because then you can't sandwich him. So just be aware of that. Try to wait for him to come out to the middle before you start knocking them around to each other and sandwiching them. Also, don't use any special moves here aside from on the minions. You don't want to use special moves on him because it wastes your health and it doesn't do much damage to him. But it does kill the minions pretty fast. So use your special just to take out the minions real fast so you can concentrate again on this guy. Now here, my friend is fighting off the minion and he's trying to avoid getting killed. So I'm just taking care of the boss at this point. Now he comes in and helps me out a little bit. But that's another strategy with two players. If you can, try to have your friend survive. If he's about to die and you have half of your health or more, or if you just have more health, try to get in there and finish off the fight or do something in the meantime, you know what I mean? To get some damage done. It's just a way to stretch out your survival, you know what I mean? Because any lives you save is going to benefit you. Since you share the same lives, you don't want to drain that lives pool. And here we both leveled up, I believe, at the end of the stage from the point tally, so we both had full health, which was good. And at that point, it doesn't matter who gets the health. Our levels are pretty caught up here. I'm only one level ahead now of my partner. I think I was letting him get more of the treasure and shit like that to catch up a little bit. You can see I'm the more aggressive player as my score is about 40,000 points higher because I'm a real, aggressive player. That's just my play style. I like to play really aggressively. But you don't have, both players don't need to be going extremely aggressive. One player can play a little bit more carefully. The enemy encounters really shouldn't give too much trouble, the regular enemies. And you're going to get used to dealing with these enemies in various combinations because, that's all you're going to be dealing with for most of the game. The guys with the longer swords do have a long reach, but they're a little slower. But still, you want to take them out fast because they do huge damage if they land. And they're not that slow, so... The phantom enemies that flip around, they shouldn't hit you too often. They're usually pretty easy. But when they're mixed in with other enemies, sometimes they'll get in a hit here and there. The regular sword soldiers are usually easy, but you'd be surprised how many times they can get in a quick stab and do a lot of damage to you if you're not taking them too seriously. So you always want to try to be aggressive with all the enemies on screen. Just take them out. Don't let them get hits in. Now, in this area, they give you a good amount of these screen clearing orbs. So you can get one here, take these guys out. And now there's another orb coming up. And after you take out these sword man enemies, there's going to be another orb. And you can see that this one got a little sloppy on some of the enemy encounters. This part is really not refined. It was just our regular run through the game and what happened. But the bosses, of course, is all spliced. Now, for this orb, I could have got more enemies on screen, I believe, and then used it. I probably should have done that. So you may want to try to scroll the screen a little bit more and get, multiple tall men and all these other enemies on screen at the same time. You probably can wipe them all out. I don't know if we've ever done that, so I don't know if that works, but I think, looking at the footage, it seems like it would work. And after I grabbed it, I was thinking that, I probably could have waited a little longer. Since it clears out all the enemies, no matter how strong they are, it will take them all out. As soon as you grab that orb, it clears the whole screen. You can see the last stage has some pretty tough enemy, combinations, so there's definitely some lost lives. But not a shitload. I was really draining lives on the bosses when I played on solo, and in two-player we were draining tons of lives on some of the bosses. So if you just take the time to do save load state practice on every boss, and you do that with a partner, just do a run through the game where you don't worry about beating the game. Just focus on practicing each boss encounter. And of course, pay attention to the enemy encounter so that you're decent at those as well. But focus on practicing with save states each boss encounter. And, practice it until you can beat it a few times in a row with your partner without dying. You want to be able to beat each boss encounter without any deaths, aside from the last boss. If you can beat the last boss only dying 3 or 4 times, it's good enough because... and that's actually still pretty decent because you're going to save so many lives by mastering these bosses that if you die a few times on all the other bosses overall, it's not going to impact you too much. You'll have a lot of lives to drain on the final boss. You want to at least get to the final boss with a lot of lives so that you have some room to fuck up. But I would recommend at least practicing the boss. We practiced the boss till we could beat it on maybe it was 3 or 4 deaths. I'm not sure. Maybe it was 2 to 4 deaths if I had to guess. We didn't practice it that thoroughly initially. And then when we got there, we did really well somehow and only died once. I think I might have died or he died or something, but I died and we only died one time. So you're going to see that really lucky attempt, but that wasn't well practiced, that attempt. I mean, we did some isolated practice, but we didn't really master it at that point. And even after we got the no death run, I still didn't have it mastered. I mean, I couldn't do it that well consistently, but I could do it pretty well with my partner. We were doing pretty well consistently. But we'd reset whenever we died, pretty much, or fucked it up. Because we wanted to get the no death on that final practice session, and that was done just we had to play through the game again to get back to the final boss, and then we spent maybe 2 hours just practicing the final boss until we got it with no deaths, and we did that just for the tutorial. So probably around 13 hours or a little under 13 hours to make this video because of the playthrough taking about 9 hours and 40 minutes, and maybe another 3 hours playing through the game again, maybe 2 hours on the final boss again, 2 additional hours from the previous practice session. For that part, all you got to do is stay on the bottom of the screen. Don't try to get the barrel where those dropping chain balls are at. Don't try to get that. Just stay on the bottom, and the guy will disappear after 2 times. Now, for this, all you got to do is have your partner take out the minions and have the other player just line up with the mechanism, the chest of that big armor boss, and you want to make sure you're making contact. So look for the sparks, but all you do is strike twice, special move. Strike twice, special move. Strike twice, special move. Same as the big fat guy. But you want to have one player just keep doing that because you're going to get invincibility frames from your special, even though it's going to drain your life, and you can survive through that. If you lose 1 life, it's not a huge deal. Another way to do it is to use your invincibility frames to dodge when the boss slams his attack down. It's like something he has on a chain. He's going to slam it down. If you time your special attack just at the right time, you will dodge it as well. So that's another thing you can do, but I didn't really like playing it like that because it's kind of tricky to dodge. There is a timing to it, though, but I was just more used to when I practiced, I would strike twice, use a special, strike twice, use a special, and that's, for me, alternating like that worked very well, just like it did on that other boss. So just get in there and just keep spamming that. Have your other player take on the minions, which are very easy to take on if you have somebody else taking care of them. If not, it's easy to get interrupted while you're trying to hit the boss. This is another very easy Phantom, but if you play it safe, you can avoid, aggroing the knight on the knight on the bottom right. You know what I mean? He'll just stand there if you don't get too close. So try to avoid having all the enemies active at once if you can. It does make it easier, but the Phantom is very easy to deal with. And this is actually near the end of the game at this point. There's going to be, maybe a final stretch of enemies after this. But yeah, with that chain ball part, I didn't get a chance to explain it well. You want to stay at the very bottom of the screen and not move up at all. Just stay at the very bottom and just wait for the knight to come down. And he'll disappear twice and then that whole screen ends. Just don't try to get the barrel. It's usually a shitty treasure or something. It's not even a good item. And you'll probably get killed trying to get it with those chain balls. So just stay at the very bottom of the screen and the chain balls can't reach you. So now this is the final stretch before the final boss. And I'm going to show 2 defeats of the final boss. One is a no-death run that took us a few hours to complete. And the other one is when we got kind of lucky and beat him with only 1 death when we actually did the playthrough of the game. And, that came out real well. So they're going to show both because the one where we died once, or where I died once, is a lot faster than the no-death run. So I thought it would be good to show both because we got in some really long combos that we weren't able to duplicate on the no-death run or even in practice. So I figured maybe somebody can analyze that if they want it and try to figure out how we got those long combos because I'm not sure exactly what we did differently, but I'm going to show both. So if somebody wants to, they can kind of try to break it down and maybe try to duplicate that and get a similar result. But you really don't have to get it down to that to the point of where you get like a massive combo, and you have to just be able to continually sandwich the guy and dodge his moves, and then you'll beat it. Even if it takes a little longer, you'll still beat it. So now you got some food, some tall men, shit like that. It's all the same enemy combinations. You have an orb where you can clear out some enemies. If anyone needs health, of course, let him get it. After you level up to maybe level 9 or 10 or something like that, you change your armor. It actually, your characters look different. It's more of a visual thing. I don't know how much of a power upgrade you get. I don't really even know what leveling up does, but I assume it makes you do more damage or something like that. Maybe take less damage, but I'm really not sure. But I assume it has some kind of purpose, so it's probably good to get your levels up pretty equally between the two players. So there's some hard enemy combinations that come out here. There's going to be a lot of enemies that swarm, and it could be easy to lose a life on one of these combinations. But try to do the best that you can. Enemies do get in hits sometimes. If you've been doing well on the bosses, you're not going to get fucked over too bad if you lose, some lives here and there on the enemy encounters. It's not going to really matter. Because the game gives you, like I said, maybe 9 continues and 2 lives each. So you have probably at least 18 or 20 lives to beat the game between the two of you. So keep that in mind. And if you master the bosses, you may lose a few lives on an encounter or boss here and there, but it's not going to matter too much. So for the final boss, the idea is to sandwich him like you did with the similar boss that you fought earlier like this. And when he lands from his jump, you want to be in the air so you don't get hit by his fire that surrounds him when he lands. But the main idea is to sandwich him and to pass him around. And just be ready when he jumps, be ready to jump. And you want to only do the sandwich technique when he's really like in the middle of the screen. If he gets too close to the edge of the screen, he's going to start jacking off inside the edge of the screen and go off screen and cause tons of problems. So when he starts to get off screen, both players should move out of the way. I also liked it better when we assigned sides to each other. I took the right side, my partner took the left side, and we tried not to cross over from that because we wanted to pass the guy around and be ready to catch him. And we just had the other player handle that side. So I thought that was a really good, that seemed to help by locking each other into like a certain side and trying to stay, opposite of each other. And because I was the more aggressive player, my partner kind of just followed what I was doing and tried to catch the boss, and that ended up working better because I'm not great at coordinating with a second player. So just keep sandwiching him. When he jumps, jump up in the air so you don't get hit by his fire when he lands. And the other really dangerous thing that he does is he shoots out this power wave. Now, you'll see he raises his mace a little bit, and if you keep hitting him, you're going to interrupt his move. But as soon as he gets a chance, he's going to throw out that fire wave. So be ready to move either up or down when you're comboing him after a few combos because he's going to do that power wave and it'll do massive damage to you. So always be ready for him to shoot that. And he also will shoot that out. Just even if you don't interrupt it, he's going to try to shoot that out by doing a certain telltale sign like raising his mace. So you want to look out for that. Those are his main moves that you got to watch out for. Now this was the no death. The other one, I'm sorry. This was the one where I died once, but it was faster. See, I die here. But after that, we got some massive combos in. So you may want to analyze this particular playthrough of the boss and just see what we did differently. It might have been the spacing. I'm not sure what it was. We tried analyzing it, but we weren't sure what the difference was. But you can see this combo goes on for a really long time, and we got 2 combos like this that were really, really long. I mean, you can see a massive amount of damage being done here. Much better than in our no-death run, which we weren't able to duplicate this ever again. So, you may want to look at this and see if you can figure out what's going on differently. You don't have to get that detailed with it, though. I would just say practice with the knowledge you have, from the previous encounter of sandwiching him and dodging those 2 moves mainly. That's the 2 moves that I looked out for was his wave and when he lands from his jump, and he does that circular fire around his body. Those were the only 2 things I was really looking out for. Aside from that, I just got into a rhythm with dodging him and hitting him. I didn't even really know how to dodge him when I did this this part. I knew a little bit, but I didn't have it down that well. So that was more luck than anything. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, let me know, and thanks for watching.